Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Turning Readers into Writers with me, Emma Dhesi, your host. I'm a thriller writer and a book coach, and I specialise in helping first-time novelists write their first novel, which is a real thrill and a real privilege, in fact, to be part of somebody's journey to writing their first novel, because I know myself, and this is why I specialise in working with first-time writers, is I know how life-changing it can be to actually write that first book, be able to shift your thinking out of I never finish anything to my goodness, look at me, I have finished a book, I've finished a manuscript. Even if it's a first draft, that in itself is a really big breakthrough. And then you get that opportunity, if you want to go ahead and revise it until you feel it's ready for publication or for sending to an agent. So it's absolutely changed my life. It was the first time I'd really committed to a long-term project like that was a real mental challenge. I don't mind telling you, it was an intellectual challenge, and I stuck with it of my own volition, got to the end, and it just changed the way I saw things for my future and what else I was capable of. And the thing that I realized in that process is that writing your first novel is about more than the words on the page. It's actually about who you become in the process. And so it doesn't matter how imperfect your novel is. It really, really doesn't. It's the process of doing it. It's who you become as you write your novel. That's the most important thing. And so that is why I specialize in writing with first-time authors. Now, because of that, I talk to first-time writers a lot, obviously. And of course, I remember being a first-time writer or a first-time novelist. And I remember that feeling of just it being such a big, vast project. So vast, in fact, I often just didn't know where to start. And I know that often what we'll do is when we think about a book that we want to write, or we start a book, start a story, and we get to a difficult bit, we'll look up at our own bookshelves and we'll see the books there that are finished, that our favourite authors have written, or a breakout book that has just been, you've loved. And we think to ourselves, oh, I could never do that. I don't know how they've managed it. They clearly must be more talented than me. They must just have a natural gift for storytelling, because look at them. They've finished, they've revised, and they've published their book. Now, whilst you intellectually are telling yourself, yes, Emma, I know that they've finished their book and they've put it out, and I know that they wrote a very imperfect first draft, and then they revised it, and then they improved it. Whilst intellectually I might understand that, my body and my emotions and my psychology are saying, that's not true. They knew exactly what to do. They got it right first time. They are gifted and I'm not. Or it's saying, yeah, that's okay for them, but it's not okay for me. I've got to get it right first time. And so it's really, really hard, isn't it, then, to kind of give yourself a break, give yourself some grace to make some mistakes, and to just get a first draft down, just get the basic story down. So I want to help you start to sift through that kind of barrier. And the way that I want to suggest that to you today is to write in chunks. To consider writing in chunks. So what do I mean by that? Well, for me, writing in a chunk is really breaking down a scene. So a scene is a unit of space or time where your characters are, and if there's a new character comes into the space or it changes location, then that is a new scene. So for me, it's really breaking it down into the scene. Where is this scene taking place and who is there? And when I kind of come down to it at that level, I start to forget about all the other things that I need to worry about. So I've talked about this being like a meditation. It is very much like a meditation for me, where you're in the moment. You're not worrying about the scenes that have come before. You're not worrying about all the things you don't know that are going to happen in the future. You're just focused on this one scene. Now that scene might last 2 pages. It might last 10 pages, but it's just one scene in which you are deeply involved in. So you're forgetting about everything else. You're just chunking the whole story right down to this one scene at this time. So it might be a conversation between two people. So you want to be able to put yourself in the shoes of both of those people. Just what are they talking about? What is at the crux of their dilemma? Why are they at odds with one another? And rather than kind of trying to plan ahead or second guess your characters, you're just sitting yourself in that moment with them. You're listening to each of them. And they will talk to you if you give them the space and you give them that moment and you chunk down just to that conversation. And even when you're doing the first draft, you don't even need to worry about dialogue tags. You don't need to worry about the description in between. If you need to, you just focus on the dialogue, on the words that they are saying. And that can be a way of chunking that down even further. So that's all you're concerned with right at that moment. You're living in the moment. What Eckhart Tolle might describe as living in the now. The power of now. You're not worrying about what came before. You're not worrying about what came after. You're not looking at spelling mistakes. You're not worrying about what an agent might say or anything like that. You're just focused on that one moment and that one conversation between two people in your scene. Or it might be a different type of scene and you're setting up the scene and you're just describing the landscape in which the scene is going to take place or the room in which the scene is going to take place. And that's all you do. That's all you write. You just write a paragraph or two, depending on the depth you want to go into, about this scene, about the setting of where this scene is going to take place. And that's all. And then you go away, your writing session is done for the day, and then later you come back and you might then start a bit of dialogue and you just write about this one conversation, and then that's it. That's all you need to do, and then you stop for the day and you move on. You've chunked it right down so that you are not thinking about the whole book. You're not thinking about the finished product on the shelf. You're just thinking about one moment in time between one person or two people. Now, what's great about that is you're not worrying about word count, for example. So, you might have an idea in your head about that each of your scenes, you want to be 1,000 words. You can throw that concept out the window. You can throw that preconceived idea of what a scene needs to be out the window. And you just get to focus on the here and the now and what's happening in the moment. And what will come out will be what comes out. And that is often where the magic happens as well, when you're not trying to pre-plan it, you're not trying to preempt it. You just let your brain roam free, you let your brain play, and that is often when the real nuggets of gold come out of the back of your head and put themselves onto the page, and you surprise yourself and you have one of those aha moments, because it was there in the back of your head, but you just needed to let it happen. And here it turns out that you knew the answer to a conundrum all along, you just didn't know how to fit the pieces together. But once you take that pressure off and you let your brain play, you let your creativity go wild a bit, then that's where those aha moments come out and those little epiphanies arrive. And it's such a good feeling when it happens. And it doesn't happen every time, but when it does, it feels really, really good. So don't think that you've got to have a certain word count. If it turns out it's 200 words, then so be it. That's 200 words. If it turns out that it's 2,000, so be it. That's 2,000. Remember, this is your first draft. This is you playing. This is you telling yourself the story, nobody else. So it doesn't have to fit into any particular prescribed idea of what the scene is. So that's nice. It gives you that freedom to play. It gives you the freedom for your brain just to be creative and see what happens and get experimental. And the other thing about that then, what that feeds into, is that you get to keep the momentum going. Because you're enjoying what you're doing. You're not putting the pressure on yourself. You're seeing what comes out. What are your characters going to tell you today? And that's fun. And that means that you don't have to have everything worked out ahead of time. You don't need to know the answers yet. That can come in revision. You just get to sit down, write for however long you have available to you, and just let the momentum go and see what happens. If you get stuck for a little bit, if your brain kind of dries up for a bit after 20 minutes or so, you have a choice. You can either say, hey, that's good, that's me for today, I've done 20 minutes, I've made some progress and I feel good about it. but now I need to get on with the rest of my day. Or you get to say, oh, that was good, but I need to stand up and stretch and walk around, go and make a cup of tea or get a glass of water, and then I'll come back to it because I've got another hour available to me to do this writing. And then you get to come back, and your brain will, I promise you, it'll keep flying again. So if you give it enough room and you give it enough freedom, your brain will come into its own, the creativity will fly, and before you know it, you're into the next bit of the scene. And again, you'll have those aha moments because you're letting your creativity out. You're giving it the freedom and the space that it needs to find the answers to solutions. You're not trying to superimpose anything onto it. And when you do this, when you allow your brain to play, when you let your creativity, when you give your creativity space, and then you get you writing and your momentum gets going and it feels good, it boosts your confidence. It does boost your confidence in your own writing and your own abilities and in just in the story in general. And you feel good about that. So you get this feel good factor. So then when it comes to your next writing session, as long as you let your brain play, you give space to your creativity and you don't put any superseded ideas on it, in terms of word count, or how perfect it needs to be, but just play, just be experimental. Then your brain will take over again. It'll come up with some good ideas. You'll have some good aha moments. The momentum will keep going. You'll feel good about your writing. You'll start to feel more confident about it, which makes you more keen to come to the page, which means you're willing to be creative again and to do the playing, which builds the momentum, which builds the confidence and builds the fun. And so you create this lovely vortex of confidence building and progress and playing, and your novel gets written slowly, slowly, slowly by really chunking down into little bits at a time, rather than thinking of a whole scene, rather than thinking of a whole chapter, rather than thinking of a whole act or even the whole novel. You're just going right down, right down, right down, right down to a bit of description, a bit of dialogue, a bit of description again, and then maybe just some notes another time, maybe just playing around with a character description or a setting description just to see what comes up. But the point about it is it's taking the pressure off. And when you take the pressure off, that's when you get to let your creativity flow and fly. I remember this from my acting days, and one of our directors, we would do a lot of research for our plays. This was when I was at drama school, and we would do a lot of research for the shows that we were doing. We would try and learn about the character, where they come from, where in the world, the time period, and think about their position in life and the circumstances that they find themselves in. And so we'd do all this. And then we'd come in and we'd talk about it and we'd share it. And then our director would say, okay, now throw it all away. Throw it all away and just tell the story. That's what he would say, just tell the story. And it's the same here. All the thinking that you're doing when you're away from your desk, all the imagination that you have about it, all the research that you've done, the images that you've pictured in your brain, have all of those, let them seep into your subconscious, and then when you come to the page, throw it all away and just tell the story. Because by doing that, you've let the background seep into you, you've let it kind of come into your bones, and be part of your body, and so you don't need to think about it anymore. You don't need to be overly conscious of it. It's already in there. Trust that it's in there, and it will come out as and when you need it to. The story will emerge. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to leave you with the reminder to chunk things really, really down to just a few paragraphs if necessary, just one conversation if necessary, not the whole chapter, maybe not even a whole scene, but just a moment in a scene, so that you're taking the pressure off, you're letting yourself, you're letting your creativity out, and you're playing. You're very playing, and the final words then I will give you will be to just tell the story. Okay, I'm going to give a shout out for Launchpad, the countdown to writing your book. If you do not have a copy yet, please do go grab a copy. It's such a good book for writers. It's got everything that you need in it. And what is so unique about this is that at the end of each chapter, we have a top 10 countdown that tells you what you need to do next, the actionable steps that you need to take next in order to implement what you have learned in each chapter. It's such a genius idea. I love it. All right, so if you want to do that, you can find it on all the stores. If you want to find a little bit more, you can go to emmadhesi.com/launchpad. All right, my dears, I will see you next time.